Hello there, and welcome to A Film a Day with me, Jordan Woodley. It's strange how, particularly in genre fiction, although not exclusively, maybe it could be levelled at action generally, how a film can be simultaneously incredibly dumb and yet at the same time incredibly clever. Because the Tomorrow War, I have a very conflicted relationship now with the Tomorrow War, because I can't tell whether I think it's a broad, sort of meat-headed, dumb action sci-fi, or actually something that's, it does have those hallmarks, but it's actually going for something a little bit more complicated and a little bit more genre savvy. Because I don't know, it's a very strange experience when you watch this and you have certain scenes where you go, okay, so this falls more into the trademark of what you might call your typical Independence Day. And then there are other moments where you think, are you going more for Christopher Nolan's Interstellar, which has its flaws, but is still a cerebral exploration of time and love and a relationship between a father and a daughter. So you can see the parallels here. And something doesn't have to be one thing, it can be both. But in dissecting this, I feel a little bit like I'm going to be disappointed with the answer, because I don't think there is a clear black and white, this is a dumb action film, or this is a layered sci-fi with a real knowledge of the history of science fiction. So The Tomorrow War, directed by Christopher McKay, is about a soldier turned science teacher who is involved in a war that is taking place in the future, and is a conscript along with many other people over the age of 40. There is a reason for that. Who are sent to the future to fight an impossibly indestructible alien species that are going to end the human race 30 years in the forward from the present day of the film. And that is a really interesting idea. It really is a very, very interesting idea, to have this idea of a war that people are going forwards in time to fight. And of course the impact it has on people in the present day, even though it has no direct relationship to them. And I think at the core that is a really strong science fiction premise. I think when you first hear about it, or if you see a trailer, the obvious comparison is Edge of Tomorrow. It has a real Edge of Tomorrow vibe, which is, of course, it's got time loops, and as I've said in previous videos, time loops are now the new hot topic for genre storytelling. It was zombies, it's been vampires, time loops. It is definitely now time loops. And so, of course, that ties into the Edge of Tomorrow thing. It's got the fact that, of course, an alien invasion with sort of monstrous sort of insect / amphibian, you're very sort of monstrous looking alien attackers. Very Edge of Tomorrow. And yet, and this is where the challenge lies, is it clearly demonstrates an incredibly in-depth knowledge of science fiction and creates a sense of intertextuality in regards to referencing different important science fiction properties in terms of building its world. So, for instance, the opening scene, you can't help but think Terminator, because it's set in the future. It's a horrifying dystopian war that's like almost inconceivable, and then it cuts to present day, and you think, well, that's so Terminator, and of course the relationship between the future and the present, and can we prevent the future? Very Terminator. As I say, you've got the Edge of Tomorrow comparisons, although I don't think it's quite as much that film as you would, on a superficial level, think it to be. As I say, the thing about Chris Pratt and his daughter and the fact that he travels through time and has a relationship both with his daughter as a child, but then the older adult daughter really harkens to Interstellar. There's something very Interstellar about that. The other major comparison that once you get to the second act, maybe sort of towards the end of the first, Starship Troopers. It has a real Starship Troopers. Of course, you've got your, like I say, these monstrous aliens that are kind of insect-like, but they're not really. They're kind of a hodgepodge of different things. And of course, the sort of almost fascist way that people are now being conscripted and sent to fight a war that they don't fully understand. And the fact that, like, you know, people are discontented. And I think that's really at its core where it is as a film. It's Terminator meets Starship Troopers with a little bit of Interstellar sprinkled in, and Edge of Tomorrow, if you know. And I think that, again, shows a sense of strong genre knowledge and a sense of, okay, we know the history of the alien invasion movies, we know the history of time travel movies, sort of the broad time travel movies, and it's difficult because I absolutely want to credit this film with showing that depth and understanding, you know, because, like I say, you could watch this and really get an Independence Day vibe. You know, Chris Pratt definitely has the Will Smith. You know, if you were to look at a basic construction of narrative, and you go, okay, what do we need? Aliens, drama, you know, but we also need like a leading man who's funny, charming, relatable, but also just that little bit other side of attractive. So he's not impossibly, you know, attractive, but he's sort of, you know, he's there, and that's what Chris Pratt is. And because, of course, he's got that witty, not quite breaking the fourth wall, but he's constantly poking, you know, with a witty line at the seriousness of the narrative he's in, I couldn't help but get Will Smith in Independence Day vibes. And of course, you've got characters like J.K. Simmons, who plays his father, who, again, reminds me of the dad from Independence Day, Jeff Goldblum's dad. I forget who plays him. You know, that sort of nut job, estranged son relationship. And it does... And so on this level, it does feel a little bit like a 90s script that's been polished off. They've gone, okay, can we insert time travel into this? And then they've set it, you know, and it's sort of been brought to 2021. And then there are other aspects of it. There is clearly in the writing a real sense of satire, or maybe not satire, relevance, I suppose. You know, so once the discovery of this future war happens, people from the future come to the past and say, there is a war, we need you to fight because there's only 500,000 people left. And a year passes in the time of the story where we learn that people are being conscripted. And then there's discussions about people who are being... So the people who are being sent, as I've said, are over 40. The reason being is that the people who can be sent forward are people who have already died before the time to which they are jumping. And so you have this conversation about, so the older generation are having to take the burden of responsibility to save the future for the younger generation. And that does have a really interesting commentary and discussion about, you know, the sacrifices that we make for a future we might not be in. And the sense of some people who feel entitled and feel that sense of, I don't think I should be taking on that responsibility. This is for something that I won't even be alive, or I won't even have a great deal of knowledge of. And that debate exists within the narrative of the film. And then on the converse of that, you have a younger, disaffected generation who believe that the war is a lost cause. You know, who are being told, whose parents and grandparents are being sent to fight in a war, aren't coming back, and they're told that this war will, you know, this invasion, this slaughter will happen to their generation, and they're disaffected from, you know, modern life, because what's the point of going to school and learning and being like that if the future is doomed, if there's no hope. And again, that's quite an interesting narrative. It harkens back to things, conversations about, say, global warming. Of course, it's sort of the big meta text of it, and the idea of sort of, our relationship with global warming. And then you have other things, of course, like you get this sense of COVID and the strange relationship we have with things people are willing to do and not willing to do for in respect of the virus. And on top of that, I mean, you've got Chris Pratt's character, and as I say, he is goofy, funny, intelligent, but also strong-willed, and he's sort of everything you need him to be in the story as an action hero. But again, with him and J.K. Simmons, there is another interesting commentary about the disaffected soldier and the idea of a soldier who, so J.K. Simmons' character, essentially his life and relationship with Chris Pratt never really got off started because he came back from Vietnam and never connected to his wife and son again. And then you have Chris Pratt, who desperately, because of the failings of his father, wants to have this strong relationship with his daughter, with his wife, and yet feels that same sense of disassociation, disaffectedness, that he's trying his hardest, and yet something within him is separate and is really pulling away at him. And that's, again, much more mature, much more interesting a narrative than a dumb, meat-headed action film would traditionally be. And so you get through that, and then you get to the point where we meet what was her name? Is it Eva Tartar? Oh, what was it? Eve.
Yvonne Strahovski.
That's it. Yvonne Strahovski. Sorry, Eve Strahovski's character, who, and it's not really a big spoiler because they've sort of dropped the lead in this in the trailers, and it's sort of she is the daughter in the future of Chris Pratt's character, and again, the idea of a relationship between Chris Pratt's character with his future daughter and his life's choices, how they affected her, the fact she's a scientist but also a soldier, and again, it shows a really interesting side to that relationship. As I say, the interstellar of it. I mean, I know on some level it's sort of an evolution of that, or a slight tangent on that, but again, it's the idea of a father who essentially has made a huge sacrifice, then getting an opportunity to meet the daughter who will hopefully benefit from that sacrifice. And yet at the same time, there are costs and sacrifices and consequences to that. And I, again, think that's a really interesting idea, and it's well performed by them. So, you don't meet the older version of the daughter till a little way into the film, and yet over the course of the point in which we spend with Chris Pratt and his daughter, you genuinely believe the bond between them as adults grows, and I think that's actually done very well. And so all of these things are going on within this film, and all these interesting character beats and quite complex ideas that are all simmering underneath. And even things like the fact that you have the design of the aliens, which, frankly, in a post Asimov kind of world, H.R. Geiger world, it's incredibly difficult to come up with an alien monster design that is different and unique. You take something like Edge of Tomorrow, and frankly, the thing about Edge of Tomorrow is the monsters are the least interesting part, because, at least in their look, because they just look like alien monster creatures. Unfortunately, on some level, Alien, the original, and of course its subsequent sequels, created the perfect unrelatable alien. Something that we recognise sort of, and yet is unknowable. You know, the great spider fear, or sort of the ants or termite concept, where it's like, okay, we understand these creatures, but we don't empathize with them because they are unknowable. And I think the Xenomorph is that perfect manifestation of this. And unfortunately, every alien invasion film from that point on struggle. I mean, The Thing, I'll put The Thing on the same level because I love The Thing and I think it really does that well. But particularly in the CG age, I think it's become so difficult not to create an army of just bugs or lizards or amphibians or some mashup of them that sort of looks a bit generic. It was exactly the problem I have when I discussed Love and Monsters a few weeks ago, which is just, is it just a bigger version of creatures we know, or just a sort of poor mashup of them? To this film's credit, the monsters do have a pretty cool design to them. They do look quite horrifying, to the point where, at one point, I was tempted to, in terms of the intertextuality, I was tempted to throw in Resident Evil as another film that is kind of like, well, there is something quite horrifying about these creatures. And again, you know, you go back to Starship Troopers, and I think that does that as really well as well, and I think it sort of harkens back to that in that capacity, because they do look interesting. I do think, unfortunately, once you get over the sort of horror aspect of them, and when they become more just an enemy, again, I lose interest, because I'm not interested in generic alien monster. It's just not something that particularly interests me. I'd rather Alien to Aliens or The Thing. I'd rather something that veers more towards horror than action, because I just, at that point, they may as well just be giant termites or ants or whatever have you. But you know, and that's the trouble at that point, because there is a point in the film where these interesting ideas have been set out, the character work exists, and it does get you through to the end of the film, but the film in itself, it falls back on slightly dumber, slightly more predictable action set pieces and arcs and character beats, and you get to a point where, you know, every character has fallen into much more archetypical. So Chris Pratt as your handsome lead, you know, you have a funny black sidekick, which I don't love that idea. And then you have the grizzled older figure with J.K. Simmons, who's sort of grizzled and a bit sort of broken, but he's also, you know, and you just get to a point where you think, oh, this film could have gone in a really interesting direction, but it has gone back to Independence Day principles. And there's nothing wrong with Independence Day. It's a great film of the 90s, but this film suggested more interesting cerebral ideas with a little bit of action, and I wanted it to be more like Aliens than like Independence Day. And I didn't, like I say, once there are such interesting ideas and designs within it that it carries you through to the end, but unfortunately, it does. I can't say the pieces make up the whole. It is a case of going, oh, that's interesting. Okay, it's not a perfect film, but it'll do. Because I did have fun, and it's fine. And again, Chris Pratt is such a likeable lead. I do wish and it's not his fault as an actor, and it's not his, you know, it's just the way that this industry works, but he does seem to be landing interesting sci-fi concepts that fall flat on their face. So this is interesting, and like I say, fine. Passengers is an example where it's just, what a horrible implosion of a film concept, and it's a shame, because I do think, or you know, Jurassic World, if they sort of throw that in the same thing, where it's like an interesting take on the Jurassic Park evolution of the Jurassic Park concept, but again, the way it's been going is not ideal. Because I do think he's a good actor. I think he does do some interesting projects, and of course, Guardians of the Galaxy is this masterpiece of science fiction. But I don't know. I'm waiting for the thing which I can watch him in and go, wow, that is a piece of original sci-fi magic. But hey, there is time. Anyway, Thank you for joining me. If you like the video, hit the like button, comment below, and share the video, because those all help in the algorithm. Subscribe to the channel and hit the little bell to get notifications of when I upload new videos, and do check out my back catalogue of over 150 videos. Follow me on Twitter at Jordan_Woodley, where I'm always tweeting about TV shows, movies, and I share these videos once they're uploaded on YouTube, either the day of or the day after. Thank you for joining me. Take care.